How many people did their homework? All right. Well, I'm going to start with the homework. Okay, we're going to start with Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 8. And the Lord is saying, he saw that for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and I had given her a bill of divorce. The problem was she got married to the world with all of its idolatry. All right, so here we have the God of Israel giving a bill of divorcement to the nation of Israel. Well, how many of you know God follows Torah? It's his word, his law. Let's go back now to the law. Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4 says, when a man has taken a wife and he's married her, and it came to pass he find no favor in his eye. Maybe she burnt the toast. Okay, who knows? Okay, then let him write her a bill of divorcement. That's very important. Even today, if the husband doesn't like the wife, it's not fair to her to give her the bill of divorcement, because then she can't marry anybody else. They get divorced, you can't marry because she's still married. You can't have two husbands at the same time. Okay? So he has to give her a bill of divorcement and send her out of the house. And when she has left the house, she can go and be another man's wife. Now, if the second husband also hates her and writes her a bill of divorcement and gives it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if he dies, the one who took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. Okay, because that's an abomination. All right. A couple of things come to my mind. First off, how come men can have multiple wives, but wives can't have multiple husbands? What? Well, that's one question. But the other thing is, I think that is merciful. Merciful. Because the men being dominant, you can have all these men taking advantage of this poor woman, saying they're all married to her, and they probably end up killing each other. Okay. Unlike women who don't necessarily kill each other if they have one husband. But I really think in one sense that that's a good thing. But it says he can't take her again to be his wife. But you know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say that she can't marry him, though. Think about that. It says he can't marry her. Okay, he can't treat her like property and say, that's mine, you got to come back to me, and force himself and take her, because women were treated not as almost as human beings back then. They're like property. So what this is saying, God is saying, look, he can't take her back once he kicked her out. But he also can't grab her and say, you're mine again, after the other one doesn't work. But if she liked the guy and she wants to, well, she can marry him, but he can't. In other words, are you following me? She might say, well, if maybe it was a misunderstanding, but she has the power. She's the one with all the power, saying, absolutely not. You can't take me. I don't belong to you. You following me? But it doesn't say that if she wants to, she can't go back, which is interesting. But now look at this. If that's the case, he can't take her again. Do you realize that means God can never remarry Israel? Let's say God married Israel, gave her a bill of divorcement because she was married to the world and committing adultery with idols. Okay, but now he wants to remarry her. He can't. So what happened? If God gave Israel a bill of divorcement, sent her away, how he can't marry her unless she willingly comes back? Now that's one thought. I don't know if you guys thought of that. But now here's the next thing, though. God is never going to force himself on anyone. He's not going to forcefully remarry Israel. She has to be willing to come back. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, but now it says in Romans 7, No, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law. So he's speaking to Jewish people, basically, because most of the newly saved Gentiles don't know Hebrew, don't know Torah. So he's speaking to the Jewish people in Rome. He's speaking to the Romans, but it's those Jews who live in Rome. He says, you know, the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. For the woman which has a husband is bound to her husband as long as he's alive. But if the husband is dead, then she's loose from the law of her husband. Okay? So then, if while her husband lives, she's married to another man, okay, what this is saying is not committing adultery per se, it's having more than one husband. This is saying women can't have more than one husband at one time. Okay, then she's called adulteress. But if her husband is dead, then she's free and she is not adulteress, even though she's already married to another man. You following that? Okay. Wherefore, my brethren, you have died to the law. Notice it doesn't say the law died to you. The law doesn't die. You've died to the law, and then it says, by the body of the Messiah, that you should be married to another. Okay? We're supposed to die. Isn't that what the Bible says? We're dead. Okay, yeah, we're dying to self and all of that. Well, if we're dead, just remember, Abraham had how many sons? Well, he had a whole bunch, but how many did he have how many did Abraham have at the first? When Isaac was born, how many kids did Abraham have? No. He had one. Abram had Ishmael. Abraham had Isaac. Okay, so what this is also saying here, once you've died, you become a new creation. Okay, so in one sense, the law is good because that's what kills us after we've broken it so we can remarry the Messiah. And look at this. Even to him who was raised from what? That means God died too. Who is Yeshua, who is divine, who gave us the law, we both died. He willingly died so he could remarry us. And we died so we could remarry him. But the law isn't dead. The law didn't change. What's happened, look at this. When we were in the flesh, the motions of sins, which were by the law, did work in our members to bring forth fruit unto death. But that's a good thing. Okay, not just physical death, but spiritual death. So when we become the new creation, all right, now we are delivered from that law, that being dead wherein we were held. Now we will serve in newness of the Spirit. I put in parentheses, of the law, and not in the oldness of the letter of the law. So the law isn't done away. Now we're serving God in the spirit of the commandments, not in the letter of the commandments. Does that make sense? Okay, so actually this is honoring women in the Torah, not dishonoring them. Something to think about. But now, here we are in Toldot. Okay, now, in Genesis 25:7, it says, these are the generations or the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 175 years. Now, that was last week. Now we're going to go to Genesis 25:19 and 20. Look what it says. These are the generations of Isaac. If you have your Genesis Bible, the Mark Biltz Genesis Bible, you're going to see a different translation. I used the King James basically in my notes. But I want you to notice in the Genesis Bible, it says these are the stories. Okay, the word generations in Hebrew is dor. But it's not dor. The word is toldot. So what does toldot mean? What's the difference? If they're both translated as generations, what's the fine-tuning difference between toldot and dor? Dor is the lineage, begat. But Toldot is the lineage plus the history, the stories. Let me tell you what your Uncle Bill did, or whatever it might be. Okay, so it's not only history, it also could be the stories. And to me, that's what makes the Bible come alive, is the stories. What did Yeshua do his whole life? He told stories, parables, and things like that. Okay, so we're going to look at more than the lineage. We're going to look at the stories, and we see Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. And look at this. She was the sister to Laban. Now in verse 26. 20 years later, look at this. It took 20 years to have Jacob. It says, after that his brother came out, his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Yaakov. And Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah bare them. Now, who can remember, when were Jacob and Esau born? What was the big event of that year? It was a Jubilee year. I think that's fascinating. Jacob and Esau were born in a Jubilee year. We see Rebekah was barren for 20 years. Okay, so how old is Abraham when Jacob and Esau were born? Abraham was 160. He died at 175, which means Jacob and Esau knew him for 15 years anyway. They got to know Grandpa Abraham for 15 years. Now, what's interesting about this phrase, generations, how many of you know, if you were going to write a book, how many of you know the editor always wants to correct your spelling? They're always correcting your grammar, they're correcting your spelling, been there, done that. But did you know in Hebrew there are many spelling errors still? And God wanted them to be spelled wrong. That's what people tried. In English, they tried to correct all of God's spelling errors rather than making the spelling error be in the English, so we don't know their spelling errors. For example, in generation 2, right after creation, it says these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, and the word is Toldot. But in Genesis 5:1, when it says these are the generations of Adam, what do you notice? The spelling is wrong. What's missing? That second vav. Now, do you remember? I mean, it's like the second O is missing. All right. Well, you would think someone would have corrected that, but did you know the next 70 times in the Torah that Toldot is written, it's written wrong. It's written without that second vav. Okay, so and the Jews left it wrong. So what do you think is happening? Anyone have any idea why it would be spelled wrong and why God would have Moses make sure? Because Moses is the one who wrote Genesis. You would think Moses would go, God, why in the world are you having me spell this word wrong? Does anyone know why? Yeah, the first one is the heavens and the earth is spelled correctly. Is man. Okay, but why? What happened though? Why is it there that it's spelled wrong? Okay, well think about this. The letter Vav, what is the letter Vav? What does it mean? It's a connection. It's like a nail. It looks like a nail. It's just, straight down like you would hit a nail. Well, guess what? God created everything perfectly. But when it came to man is defective. He sinned. And so the connection between heaven and earth was broken. See, the Vav is the connection. Okay, there's half a connection. There's one Vav, but now the other connection has been broken because man sinned. So when is the next time that the word Toldot is spelled correctly? King David what? When he was born. Here we go to the book of Ruth. It says, now these are the generations, or Toldot, of Peretz. And guess what? And Ruth 4:22, Obed beget Jesse, Jesse beget David. David is the missing man. The Vav is the number 6. Man was created on the 6th day. So David is the one who's going to restore the connection back to heaven by bringing forth the Messiah. Isn't that amazing? Now, look at Matthew 1:1 in the Gospels, the book of the generation of Yeshua HaMashiach, the son of who? It doesn't say Adam. It doesn't say Noah. It doesn't say Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. Why does it say David? Why here? What is Matthew trying to say by starting it with David? All right, well, we're going to take a look at the Bible. It goes on to say in Matthew, so all the generations, the Toldot, from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David to the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations. From the carrying away into Babylon to Messiah are 14 generations. Why does it keep repeating 14, 14, 14? Christians have no idea because they've disconnected themselves from Hebrew. Here are the first few letters in Hebrew. Can everybody say them with me? What is this? The Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. Okay, these are the first 6 letters. I have the Dalet and the Vav in purple because David is 2 Dalets and a Vav, and if you add that up, that is 14. So when it says 14, 14, 14, the Jew is saying David, David, David. And he's the Messiah, son of David. Matthew is trying to tell us that this is the promised seed from David. But you don't notice the 14 means David if you don't know the numerical value is 14 of his name. So that's really what they're trying to let everyone know. David. Okay, now, let's look at this. This also is very fascinating. Okay, how old was Abraham when he died? So, how old was Isaac when Abraham died? 75. Exactly. And Jacob and Esau, as I said, were 15. Okay. Let's see. Let me show you this. Here's a timeline. You guys have a copy of this, and it's quite amazing. The way this timeline is working, I have it so how old was Isaac when these events happened? So Isaac was born, okay, and then Isaac is 37 years old when he gets bound and his mom dies. He was 40, we just read, when he marries Rebekah. He was 60, we just read, when Jacob and Esau was born. Okay, and Jacob and Esau were 15 years old when Abraham dies. So Isaac was 75, as we just said. Isaac is 100 years old when Esau, who is 40, marries a Canaanite. Now look at this. Shem finally dies. Wow, Abraham died long before Shem, who was on the boat with Noah. That is incredible. Okay, so I'm going through here, but look at this. Isaac thinks he's going to die at 137 years old. Why do you think Isaac thinks he's going to die at 137? Because, what do we see? Ishmael died at 137. So if Ishmael's older than him, and Ishmael is dying, he's probably going to die soon as well. But look at this. He lives a whole lot longer. He doesn't die until clear over here at 180. It's 37 years later or so he died. He thinks he's going to die, but he doesn't die. So here Abraham is dying. Here Shem is dying. But I think it's amazing. He's 137 when Isaac thinks he's going to die, but he doesn't die until he's 180. So amazing about this, you know what this means? Isaac knew Shem also for 95 years. Isaac knew Shem. Can you imagine? He's the guy on the boat. Abraham knew Noah. Abraham knew Noah. Wow. Talk about getting a first-hand revelation of what was going on. But since Isaac knew Shem for 95 years, Shem got to tell him all about the boat. And Jacob and Esau knew Shem for 50 years. This is why Jacob, he was really in tune into what Shem was saying. So, let's see. In Genesis 9, 28 and 29, we're going to jump back a minute. It says, Noah lived after the flood how many years? 350, and all the days of Noah were 950 years. Abraham personally knew Noah for 58 years. So Abraham really got to know. This is where his belief in one God came from. Now, look at Genesis 11, 10 and 11. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old. And there was the flood, and then he begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood, and then Shem lived after he begot Arphaxad 500 years. That's a long flipping time. So Shem dies at 600, years old, living over 500 years after the flood even happened. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Now, get a load of this. When we go over the generations from Genesis 11, verse 12 to 26, here's what we find. Shem is already 390 years old when Abraham is born. And he outlives him. Shem is 490 when Isaac is born. He's 550 when Jacob and Esau are born. He's 565 when Abraham dies. So Shem even got to know Jacob and Esau until they were 50 years old. That's amazing. So now here what we find. Here is Genesis 25, 21 through 23. Isaac is entreating the Lord for his wife Rebekah because she was barren. And the Lord heard him, and Rebekah conceived, and the children were already fighting in the womb. And she said, Lord, if this is going to happen, kill me. And she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb. I think it's interesting. It's not 2 kids. It's symbolically what this is saying. There are 2 people groups. One person doesn't make a nation. Basically, these 2 individuals are going to be fathers of 2 completely different types of people. Okay? The one will be stronger than the other, and the elder will serve the younger. Now, here's something else I want to point out. Do you know it was Rebekah, not Isaac, who received the word concerning God's choice of Jacob over Esau? It was Eve, not Adam, who received the prophecy concerning her seed. It was Sarah, not Abraham, correctly discerned God's choice of Isaac over Ishmael. It was Miriam, Yeshua's mother, not Joseph, who receives the angelic word first. You see a pattern here. Now, when it says Rebekah went to inquire of the Lord, where did she go? To talk to Shem. Shem is still alive. She goes to Jerusalem. She talks to Shem. Okay, so now here we are in Genesis 25, 27, and 28. Jacob and Esau are growing. Esau was a cunning hunter. He was a man of the field. And then it says Jacob was a plain man. Some translations say he was a homely man. Other ones say he was a quiet man, living in tents. But Isaac loved Esau because he ate his good food, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Do you know what the Hebrew word there is, tameh? And what does that mean? Does it mean plain, homely, or quiet? Basically, it means someone with integrity. He was a man of integrity. It shouldn't say plain man. It shouldn't say homely man. It shouldn't say a quiet man. He was a man of integrity, basically, without blemish, without spot. So in Genesis 25, 31 through 33, Jacob says, sell me this day your birthright. And Esau said, I'm at the point of die. What profit is it? And Jacob said, swear. And he swore and he sold his birthright to Jacob. Now, you have to notice Esau put food as the priority over the birthright. Right? Okay. Let me point this out. Let me go to the next thing here. Well, look at the next verse. Genesis 25:34. Now Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. He ate and he drank. He rose up, went his way, and Esau despised his birthright. It says Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. What does that mean? Huh? It means someone just died. Here's the Jewish funeral guide. The meal of condolence is always bread and lentils. But if you don't know the Jewish culture, you don't know someone just died. Wow, okay. Who died? We have Abraham dying on my timeline, and we had Shem dying on my timeline. Now, also, you have to notice all Esau wanted was the stew. But he gives him bread. He gives him stew. He gives him, the lentils, and he gave it to him. All right? And now, I think it's amazing that we can see Esau despised his birthright. But you know what? Let me go back to this timeline. I believe this happened not when Abraham dies, but when Shem dies. And Esau now has a family. Isaac isn't even married at this time. Isaac doesn't have any kids, but Isaac wants the birthright. Esau despises it. What's significant of the birthright? It goes back to the promised seed of the Messiah to Adam and Eve. Someone's line is going to bear the Messiah. Why would Esau despise the fact that he could be the line of the Messiah? That's what he is missing. But Shem and Abraham told Isaac what had happened, and Isaac goes, I want the Messiah to come through me. Most people miss that whole significance. And so he says, I want this. All right? And like I said, Esau's married. He has kids. But it's all about him. That's the problem. It's all about him. Oh, before I go there. Okay, so now, here, when Shem dies, Jacob and Esau are 50. He's a cunning hunter. So this is why I think it's after Abraham. They're only 15 when Abraham died. But now they're 50 years old. He's a cunning hunter, man of the field. Their father Isaac is now 110 years old when Shem dies. Do you know what that means? Isaac knew his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa for 95 years. All right. Now, where did Isaac at 37 years old go after the Akedah? To Jerusalem to talk to Shem. You got to remember, Shem was Melchizedek, the king of Jerusalem. He had a Bible university there already. Okay, so what is happening? Jacob attended the school of Shem. All right? And he was concerned about the Melchizedek priesthood as well as the seed of the Messiah. When you look at Exodus 19:6, it says Israel will be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. And back to Genesis 26:34, we saw Esau was 40 and he marries a couple of Hittites, which means terrorists, and they were bitterness of spirit to both Isaac and to Rebekah. All right. You know, it's interesting, too, when you think about it. The Hittites were the Canaanites And if you think about this, Shem was still alive when he married the Canaanites. Don't you think Shem had warned Jacob and Esau about marrying Canaanites when he saw what happened to his brother Ham? Wow. Esau knew Ham was cursed and Canaan was cursed, but he doesn't care. So after Shem's death, who is alive at the time to inherit the priesthood? It's going to be Jacob and Esau, and Esau despises it. He doesn't want to be the priesthood. Okay, so now let's go to Genesis 26, 1 through 5. There's a famine in the land during Isaac's time, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac goes to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and the Lord appears to him, and he says, don't you go down to Egypt like your daddy did. You dwell right here. Sojourn in this land. I'll be with you. I'll bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. I will make your seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and I'll give to your seed all these countries, and in your seed will all the nations of the earth be blessed. Why? Because Abraham obeyed my voice. He kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Wait a minute. Abraham is 400 years before Moses. What? How in the world could Abraham be following all the commandments? Guess what? Because they were instituted, even to Adam and Eve knew the commandments. They all, in stages they knew, but Adam and Eve had to know the difference between clean and unclean animals if they're going to do offerings. Even Noah knew unclean animals when they got on the boat. There are certain laws that they knew all along. But here, Abraham knows the statutes, the judgments. Now, obviously, there was no temple, so he didn't know those laws. But basically, he knew God's heart. Isn't that amazing? Now, what happens? In Genesis 26, 12 through 15, Isaac sows in the land, and he reaps in the same year 100 times what he planted. In a time of famine, the Lord blessed him. He grew great. He grew more and more until he became very great. He had possessions of flocks, herds in his household. And so what? The Philistines envied him. Now, this is the most mind-blowing thing in the world. Talk about stupid is as stupid does. It says, all the wells which Abraham's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with dirt. They're so mad at Abraham being blessed, they stopped the wells of living water. You need water in a famine. And those very wells they fill with dirt. That reminds me, not too long ago, Israel turned over to the Palestinians, the Gaza Strip, that had all of these things. They were major exporters to Europe of all kinds of goods. And what did they do? They tore everything down to use the metal to make missiles, and they ruined their whole economy. I mean, stupid is as stupid does. And that's what happens when you get filled with anger. Not only that, your livestock need water, not just you, all right? And so now, in Genesis 26, 16, and 17, Abimelech says to Isaac, get out of here, because you're mightier than we. How stupid again. If someone is stronger, have them be your protector instead of getting rid of them. I mean, it's just so stupid. And so Isaac left, and he encamped in the valley of Gerar, which I've showed you, which is real close to the Gaza Strip. And so look at this in Genesis 26, 18. Did Isaac try to dig new wells? No. Isaac dug again the wells of water, which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the very same wells. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And then it says he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. Does anybody see any patterns here? Let me tell you something. This is amazing. Every one of you right now, as you are reinvestigating and digging into your ancient roots, it's just much like Isaac's journey going back to the wells of his father. The original sources have been hidden and buried by Christians. And now, okay, we're going back to the wells of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our fathers, unclogging them and letting the living water flow from the Tanakh. We know the Torah is likened to a well of water. It's been hidden from us and filled with dirt. Do you realize what we're doing right now, right here? You are helping me get all the mud and the dirt so the well of the springing water of the Torah can come flowing to us. I mean, that is mind-blowing. Now, Genesis 27:1. It came to pass that when Isaac was old, he's only 137, not 180 yet, his eyes were dim, he couldn't see, and so he called Esau, his oldest son. And he said, my son. And he said, here I am. I think it's interesting. It says Esau was his what? It doesn't say his firstborn. Even though he was his firstborn, it's relating to him as the elder, not necessarily the firstborn. Physical blindness is often a common metaphor for spiritual blindness. Rebekah can see, but Isaac is spiritually blind. He can't tell the difference. Well, guess what? There's inherited blindness, and we see Jacob was blind in his old age as well. Now, look at Genesis 48:10. Now the eyes of Israel. Who's Israel? Jacob. Were dim of age, so that he could not see. All right, that is referring exactly back to Isaac. And here it says, what is Jacob doing? He brought Ephraim and Manasseh near to him. He kissed them, and he blessed them. But here's the thing. You have to remember, Israel is Jacob. Remember that? Did you know Romans 11 tells us about this very incident in Genesis? Look at Romans 11:25. Paul says, I don't want you Gentiles to be ignorant of this mystery, lest you become too wise in your own conceits. Blindness, what? In part has happened to Jacob or Israel. Okay? We see in part. The Bible says we see in part. We see through a glass darkly. Well, guess what? Jacob/Israel was only blinded in part. We both see out of one eye. And the first group to humble themselves and look out of both lenses gets to see the clear picture. That goes for the Jew and the Gentile. But in each of our own arrogance, we refuse to even look at what the other person sees. It says it happens to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. What does it mean by the fullness of the Gentiles? Maturity. Not quantity. There's no magic number. God is waiting for the church to grow up. He doesn't want to marry a child bride. Okay. Not only that, how could a Jew, a Jew would have to be totally blind. A Jew would have to be totally blind to accept a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Messiah who abolishes the Torah and whose followers regularly killed them in his name. What is more, such a statement ignores Christianity's own blindness to the Messiah. Even though we've possessed the gospel for 2,000 years, Christians are still largely blind to Jesus' Jewishness and don't even know his real name was Yeshua. We're both partially blind. 1 Corinthians 13:12, we see through a glass darkly. I know in part. All right? Let's go to Matthew 7:22-23. Many will say in that day, Lord, Lord, did we prophesy in your name? In your name cast out devils. In your name done all these wonderful works. And then he says, I never knew you. Here are people that are doing things in his name that don't even know him. They're just name dropping, like the one sorcerer who was trying to cast out demons in the God that Paul knows. And that's is what happens a lot in the church, in the prophetic movement. They don't even know the Lord. They don't even know the Torah, and they're going around prophesying in his name. Look at this, Isaiah 42, 19 through 21. Remember the Laodicean church was blind? Well, it's the same thing before the Christianity ever came. It says, who is blind? But my servant is blind. Who is deaf? The messenger I sent. Who is blind is he that is perfect, and blind is the Lord's servant. They see many things, but they don't observe. Opening the ears, but they don't hear. Now, here's my favorite verse you've always heard me say. Here it is. The Lord is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He is going to magnify the Torah, and he's going to make it honorable once again. That is El Shaddai Ministries' goal, to magnify the Torah like a snowflake. Look at the details in it under a microscope. And then, wow, we make it honorable. And so if you magnify it, you make it so you can see it. Yeah, I don't know how many of you watch Forensic Files, but they're all into the DNA and, they're looking at the DNA. Oh, that DNA goes to that person there. My goal is to do that with the Torah and magnify it so you can see the DNA of the Torah. And that's what's exciting. But look at Luke 24, 15 and 16. It happened, this is after Yeshua rose on the road to Emmaus. It says, while they were talking and questioning together, Yeshua came near and he went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. What does that mean? Their eyes were kept. They were blinded. So why in the world would we condemn the Jews if they're blind when it's because God was covering their eyes? Yeah, God is covering their one eye. And now God is purposely covering our other eye. And he's saying, you two need to get along. Like I say, I know how to eat chicken. I can eat the meat throughout the bone. There's a lot of bones in Judaism, and there's a lot of bones in Christianity. The difference is one is a steak and the other is carp. Okay. I think what's also fascinating, God blinded Isaac's eyes on purpose. It was to accomplish his purpose in bringing forth the Messiah through Jacob and not Esau. Had Isaac not been blinded and could plainly recognize Esau, the redemption process would have taken a completely different turn. So if Israel had not been blinded, what would have happened to the redemption of the Gentiles? Genesis 27, 2 and 4. He says, behold now, I'm old. I don't know when I'm going to die. Now, therefore, take, I pray you, your weapons, your quiver, your bow, go out to the field, take me venison, make me savory food, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I can eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Okay. How old are they at this time? How old when this happens, when this event happens, and now Esau gets all upset and he cries out. Do you have any idea? Let's take a look. First off, Isaac thinks he's going to die at 137 years old. All right? But what happens, we see he was 144 when Jacob worked 7 years to marry Leah. And so this event happens. Jacob and Esau are 77. You have two almost 80-year-old men fighting over this birthright. When Jacob put on this garment to fool his father Isaac, he was 77 years old. In our mind, we think they were younger. But they were older than me. Now that's getting old. Okay. And why did Esau not tell Isaac that he had sold the birthright earlier? 27 years earlier, as a matter of fact. I think that's fascinating. Okay, Genesis 27, 5 through 10. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt. And Rebekah spoke to her Jacob, her son. I think that's fascinating. He's your son. This one's my son. Neither one of them are both our son. It's that's his son and he's my son. Okay. And so she tells them, listen to me. According to what I command you, go to the flock, fetch me, 2 good kids of the goats. I'll make the food such as he loves, that he may eat, so that he may bless you before his death. And so we see in Genesis 27:15, Rebekah takes the goodly raiment of her oldest son, Esau, which were with her in the house, put them on Jacob, her younger son. Do you want to hear something incredible? Here, she is, in one sense, taking advantage of Isaac's blindness. Okay, the Torah is filled with masquerading. People masquerading as someone else, like Tamar masquerading. Okay, everyone's always masquerading. This event, when Rebekah had Jacob come to Isaac to be blessed, and his eyes were dim, happened on Passover. It was on Passover. Okay, that was Isaac's birthday. Isaac was born on Passover. Okay, well, I think it's interesting. Messiah comes in disguise, bringing the blessing on Passover. It says in John 1, they didn't recognize him, that he was the Messiah. So I think it's fascinating also that it happens again. Now we see in Genesis 27:19, Jacob said to his father, I am Esau. You know what? I tell you, I don't know how Jacob could not recognize the voice. I mean, you know someone's voice on the phone. You can tell, typically. Sometimes you can't, but for the most part, it doesn't say he was deaf. It says he was blind. But he says, bless me. Now, in Genesis 27 through 29, he came near, he kissed him, he smelled the smell of his raiment, blessed him, and he said, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of the field, which the Lord has blessed. Therefore, God give you of the dew of heaven. A little picture of dew. Do you know what the dew of heaven is symbolic of? The resurrection of the dead. It's the resurrection of the dead. And then he says, let people serve you, nations bow down to you, be Lord over your brothers. Well, that is interesting. Okay. Let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be he that blesses you. Okay, guess what? Genesis, this whole story here, we hear about it in the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews 11:20, it says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning what? Which refers to the resurrection of the dead. Look at Isaiah 26:19. Your dead men will live together with my dead body. They'll arise, awake, and sing. You that dwell in the dust, for your what? Dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth will cast out the dead. Now, Esau comes back in Genesis 27:32 to 34. Isaac, his father, says, who are you? I says, I'm your son. Now he adds, your firstborn. You know me, Esau. And then Isaac trembled very exceedingly. And he says, well, then who came and took of the venison and brought it to me? And I've eaten all before you even came. And I already blessed him, and he will be blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cries with an exceeding great and bitter cry and says to his father, oh, bless me, even me also, my father. And he's 77 years old. And I just, what's amazing, you're going to see Jacob repeats that phrase. God is measure for measure. And just as Esau cried out, we're going to see in the next Torah portion how Jacob cries out as well. Okay, since I'm going to go ahead, I wasn't going to do this till the second half, but some people may only do the first half. So here's your homework for next week. Are you ready? Okay. Who was Amasa? Who was he related to, and what was his job? Now, you can take your phone out and take a picture if you don't have time to write it down. But that's the homework for next week. Who was Amasa? Who was he related to? What was his job? I think it's on your notes too, but just in case. Yeah, I'm leaving it up for the moment. All right. Let's stand. Are you ready? Avinu, Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we just thank you so much for your Torah. We can hardly wait for the next half, Father, where we can jump into the book of Samuel. And Father, right now I just want to thank you for all those around the world that love you, that love your Torah, that want to redig the wells that have been filled with dirt, to go back to the wells of our early assembly. Not church fathers, but the assembly of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We thank you for those who want to bring their tithes or offerings, not to us, but through us. We take them and we just take the gospel back out to the nations, and we thank you so much for all of those who want to have seed sown into your kingdom. In Yeshua's name, amen. Together, blessed are you, Lord our God, creator and king of the universe. You have blessed us with your Torah of truth. You have blessed us with the whole counsel of your living word by the power of your Holy Spirit through the completed work of Messiah Yeshua. You alone have planted among us life eternal. Blessed are you, Lord our God. Amen. Take a break.